To perform this modification, you're going to need some tools. First thing, wire cutter, shrink tubing, a wire stripper, your connectors, some solder, solder flux, and then a hot soldering iron. Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by the channel. This is Moodog from Moodog's Frugal RCs and more. Today we're going to be doing a how-to kind of tutorial video. From time to time I will be doing this type of video to show you guys out there, maybe some of the newbies to this hobby, or maybe someone that just hasn't really worked on their vehicles before in any capacity at all, that this stuff can be done with minimal knowledge, maybe some basic soldering skills, that type of thing. What we're going to be looking at today is a 24 scale four-wheel drive monster truck. This one is marketed by Vatos. You can see the Vatos logo on the top of the body right here. There are a couple of different Chinese marketing firms that are using this platform, this car as their platform to build their cars. Basic variants in these are going to be batteries that they're using, the types of batteries, as well as the way that the batteries are installed on the vehicle. Now, what we're going to be doing today is replacing the battery connector inside this vehicle to go from the proprietary type, which is this one here. You can see this is a 3-pin. This is a lithium ion cell here, 7.4 volt. So we're looking at 3.7 volts per cell, and we're looking at probably about 500 milliamp per hour capacity on here. So about on this car, probably about a 7 or 8 minute drive time. What I want to do is kind of universalize or make kind of conformity to all my cars this size or even a little bit bigger. What I've done with most all of them thus far is gone to a JST connector. That way I can use batteries like this, guys. Now these are pretty commonplace. I have a lot of these in my inventory here. This is a 7.4 volt LiPo battery. We're looking at a balanced plug on here, so the charging on this is going to be very quick through a hobby charger, and we have a JST plug on here, which is pretty common stuff. You can get these pretty inexpensively. These, if you were to order something like this, these are a bit more, and they're kind of hard to find in some spots. You can find them on Amazon, you can find them other places, but they're a bit more expensive than these and a little bit less efficient. So what we're going to be doing today is opening this car up and replacing the stock connector with this one right here. So stay tuned, guys. Let's get at this. All right, well, the first thing we're going to do is I'll show you the car just quickly, just briefly, to show you what we're working with here. We're going to go ahead and take the body off of here. I've already moved the pins, but you can see that this car fits pretty easily in my hand right here. It is the Vatos branded one, and we have shocks all the way around. So this is a four-wheel drive vehicle, and it's a little bit muddy because it does get driven. I just haven't really showcased it yet, and I do plan on doing a video of this vehicle going forward in action. So with that being said, let's get the top off of here and we'll take a quick look at the inside of the vehicle. Now you can see here that that we have a 2.4 gigahertz receiver on this vehicle. The motor is going to be housed underneath here. It's just a small, I don't even know what size motor this would be, but you can see the blue underneath this red guard here. So the motor is underneath there. The drivetrain is all encased underneath all of the stuff on the top. So in order to get to the drivetrain, you would have to remove these other components. But there are lights on this vehicle as well. So there are working LED lights up in front here. And sorry about the camera there. There are working LED lights up in the front there. So let's go ahead and take a look at what exactly we're going to be doing today. Now we can already see that there is a JST connector that is running from the ESC, or the electronic speed control, to the motor itself. So that's kind of cool. So if you ever wanted to change a motor out on one of these vehicles, you could get one that had already pre-installed the JST, or just install it yourself just for ease of kind of plug and play. But what we're going to be doing is getting at this wire right here, cutting this end off at a decent I'll probably cut this off right about here because I don't want the existing wire that I'm going to be putting on here too long, and I want to make sure that if I ever need to use something like this again for whatever reason, I'll have enough of a tail on here that I could solder this onto something else should that need arise. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and cut this zip tie on here and free these wires up so we can get at them easier, and we'll get that out of the way there. And we can separate this motor wire here from the actual wire that we're going to be cutting. Okay, so now this wire we're going to go ahead, like I mentioned, and cut right about here, so we have, like I mentioned before, a little bit kind of a service loop. And let's get this in and make sure we're cutting them equally here. All right, so this is, we'll take this and I'll keep this and I'll set this aside and I'll put that in my oddball connector bin. But now we're going to be looking at actually going ahead and stripping these back a little bit. We're going to be using shrink tube on here, all that type of stuff, so we make sure that we're properly insulating everything, that we don't run the risk of having any kinds of shorts or anything like that. Now, before we go any farther, I wanted to show you guys how the original battery was installed on here. There are carriers on both sides of this, and let's go ahead and zoom back out again so you guys can see this a little bit better. Whoops, sorry about that. There we go. So we go ahead and zoom back out, and we'll take a look and see that this battery, the original battery, would actually fit into the side right here. There's a little carrier. There's a carrier on this side and another carrier on this side. I suppose you could carry a spare battery in here if you really wanted to. I didn't. I just used the one side like this. And then there's a little snap-on cover that would snap over the top here and hold that whole business in place like so. And then obviously this would plug into the connector that we just cut off and you would be good to go. Now this battery carrier here is a little bit smaller than I was hoping it would be. I kind of thought it was going to be able to accommodate the batteries that I was going to be putting in here, but unfortunately, and pardon me for you having to use tools to get this off of here, generally it's pretty easy to do, but I've got kind of a sore finger here. So let's get this battery out of the way. What I was saying is that this carrier here is a little bit on the small side, so we can see the thickness of this battery here compared to the regular cell. We have a little bit thicker of a battery with the LiPo here, so we're talking about maybe a 1/4 of an inch thicker. And what that's going to do is prevent us from being able to use that cover on here. So if we install the battery in here like so, it does fit. Okay, it just basically, it barely fits, but it does fit in there. And then the wire would go up on top. So what I'm proposing to do is either use this as kind of a hold down and then put a strap around it. I've got a bunch of Velcro straps that I can use to hold this in place, or some sort of a band, or just put the band directly over the battery. It's kind of up in the air. It really doesn't matter either way. I just thought maybe this would offer a little bit of protection for that cell on there, a bit more protection. But you can see that it obviously does not mate with the clips on the body itself. So we'll take that out of the way and go ahead and start this process of stripping these wires back. Now, what I use for a stripper, generally speaking, is something like this. If I can find it here. I don't believe I have it out here, but I have a multi-stripper, kind of an electrical stripper that I use for the most part. But I just bought this one recently. It seems to work out pretty good. It's a Harbor Freight tool here, and it's I made you a video showing this kind of what it is and all that type of stuff. But this actually has a wire cutter jaw right on the bottom here, and it does strip different wires, and you can actually set this little gauge as to how far you want that wire stripped back. But we'll go ahead and get these wires stripped, and I'm going to go ahead and start with this red wire first here. It really doesn't matter which one you start with, and we're going to be taking off probably about 1/8 of an inch or so of insulation off this wire. We're not going to take off a whole lot. Well, let's go ahead and take off more than that actually, because we're actually going to be soldering this on bare wire itself. So we'll take off a bit more, probably close to about a ½ inch or so of exposed wire on there. And you can go more than that if you really wanted to. Let's go ahead and get this a little bit zoomed in here so we can see what we're doing. You can see here that I've got about roughly about a ½ inch or so of exposed wire here, and we'll do the same thing with the negative wire here, or the black wire. So we'll go ahead and get this one stripped back about that same distance, and that should be good. Now if I need to take any more off of here, I will. I'm actually going to take some of the tension off of this because I did take more wire than I wanted to. You want to make sure you're not taking strands with you. This time I did a little bit, but I think we're going to be okay with what's left there. Now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with our connector wire. So this is the JST connector, and you can buy these on Amazon. You can buy these pretty much anywhere with the wires. Use a silicone coated wire and the JST plug on the end here. I'm going to go ahead and put a piece of shrink tube from the wire right here up and over the plug to kind of make a little bit of a grip area to pull to disconnect and connect the wire to the car. So right here, we're going to kind of take a quick measurement, and I want this to be probably about this long in total. Okay, so we can see, I don't know if you guys can see this or not. I hope you can. Let's go ahead and get this zoomed back out again so we can kind of see what I'm looking at here. And I apologize for the lighting, but we're looking at having it stick out about this far. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut this back about here. Okay, we could discard this wire here, and this is what we're looking at here. So we'll go ahead and strip these back as well. And I'm going to take some of the tension off of this here because it felt like it was digging into that wire a little bit more than I wanted to, and actually taking some strands with it. But we can go ahead and pull that back. And we've got a little over a ½ inch on that, but that's fine. And the same thing on this side here, guys. Okay, and that's what we want to see. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tin these wires. Basically, what that means is I'm going to go ahead and add some flux, some non-lead paste flux to these wire ends here, and go ahead and apply some solder. So we're making sure that we get a good, strong, and hot solder joint, so all of our connections are proper. All right, guys, so the next step is going to be twisting these wires together here. Now, I've got the red to the red right here, and we're basically going to make a kind of a cross configuration here, or kind of make an X shape here. And what I usually do is I'll hold them, I hope you guys can see this, and kind of roll them around each other. So we'll twist one around that way, and we'll twist the other one around this way, and go all the way around like so. Okay, so that's basically what we're looking at right there, is how that's going to look, and then we can go ahead and get that soldered up. So give me 1 second here, and we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so with those wires connected, next thing I'm going to be doing is dabbing. I'm just dabbing just a little bit of flux on this wire junction right here to kind of let that solder flow and create a nice hot solder joint for us here. So we'll just put a little bit of flux on here. Now the flux that I'm using is a non-lead flux. You don't want to be breathing a whole lot of the lead vapors from the solder or from the flux itself. Now, I've heard people say that, well, you know, this non-lead based stuff is doesn't stick as well, doesn't flow as well. I haven't had any trouble with it, guys, and I'll show you exactly what I'm using in just a second here. But we've already got our solder gun nice and hot here, and we'll go ahead and grab some solder as well. What I usually do in this case is I'll take and let's clean this tip off a little bit better here. I will go ahead and take the solder itself, and I'll just put a little bit on the tip, melt a little bit on here, just to kind of heat that up and have a little bit of a base of solder on the tip here. So now we're going to go ahead and apply the solder onto the onto the part itself, or onto the wires itself. And you can see it sizzling there, and you want to just apply a little bit of solder on the hot wire here, and you can see that we have a nice hot solder joint. All right, guys, that other one is done now, and I'll go ahead and zoom that in to show you what I've done here. And I wanted to make a mention too, before I forget about this, you want to make sure that you're using good insulator for this application. And I'll show you what I'm using in just a second here. It's pretty easy to find. I bought my heat shrink tubing assortment kit at Harbor Freight for around $6, and I'll show you exactly what I'm using. Some guys will want to color code this stuff, but if you know what's red and what's black, you can pretty much figure it out. But the thing I wanted to mention though is you want to make sure that when you're doing this stuff, guys, that you're putting the shrink tube on before you make your solder connections. The only reason I say that is because once that solder joint is made, you're not going to be able to go back and put that shrink tube on. Now there's 3 pieces of shrink tubing on here, and there's a reason for that, and I'll show you that in just a second. But you can see the negative or black wire here has a good solder joint as well. Everything is done and ready to be insulated. Now, insulating this again, guys, as I mentioned, I'm using shrink tube here. Okay, now this is basic kind of hobby grade shrink tubing. And it can be had pretty much anywhere, electronics store, Walmart. You can get probably, if you look, you could probably find it at Walmart as well. What we want to do with this now, guys, is make sure that we're covering the solder joint itself. So we want to cover that exposed wire, but we want to make sure that we have equal amounts of shrink tube on both ends of the coating here, so we're covering it equally. So let's go ahead and get this on here. And there's 2 different ways we can shrink this on. You can use a heat gun to do this, or you can use a lighter. Now I've got a lighter handy here, and I also have my heat gun. We're going to go ahead, just for sake of ease, and show you the lighter method of doing this. But the heat gun that I have, and I'll show you right here real quick, guys, is another Harbor Freight tool. And I buy a lot of my stuff, my hobby stuff, at Harbor Freight. This is a kind of a two speed or 2 heat Drill Master branded Harbor Freight heat gun. It has just a little switch on the front here for hotter or cooler. Actually changes the fan speed as well. But this seems to work out pretty good. These do get very, very hot, so you want to make sure that you're being careful when handling these things. And we're going to go ahead and let that sit for now. I don't need that for this application. But let's go ahead and get this other wire pulled down over the solder joint here, and we can go ahead from there and get this shrink tube shrunk or installed on here, basically. So basically what it's doing is it's heat activated shrink tubing, and the heat from the lighter, from the fire, actually contracts this tubing and will kind of conform better over the surface of the wire. Now we want to make sure we're holding this up out of the way and not burning any plastic on the car. And we also want to make sure that by holding this up, we're not causing the shrink tubing to slide down too far, and once heated up, is not going to cover correctly. So I'm just using one of these wand type kind of a barbecue grill lighter, and we'll go ahead and just light this lighter up here, and we'll go ahead and shrink this here, and I'll show you what the end result looks like here. Pretty easy stuff, guys. Nothing too earth-shatteringly cool or difficult to do. But you want to make sure that you're covering your solder joint and you have ample amounts of tubing on both sides of the wire, so we have a good covering here of our exposed one-time exposed wire. So that's basically the effect we want to have here, guys. I hope you can see this. I get my finger underneath here to give it some contrast, but you can see here, hopefully you can see it, that we have a covered wire here. And this lighting kind of sucks here. Let me see if I can get this light any better for you here. But you can see here that we have our wires are coated, and we are good to go pretty much here. So that's pretty much the effect we want. Now we have a good solder joint on here, and we'll go ahead and test that. I should have probably tested it before I put the coating on there, but we can go ahead and get our battery and plug the battery in and give that a quick run, quick test. So let's zoom back out again here, guys, and we'll go ahead and get the battery connected in here, and we'll hit our little power switch, which is on this vehicle hiding on me. Where did we go here? Oh, here we go. It's on the bottom. So we definitely have power. That's exactly what we wanted to see now, guys, and I think this project is pretty much done. The only thing I've left to do right now is just kind of something I wanted to do for my own, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I put a piece of shrink tubing up on here to kind of cover this area of the wire right there, to kind of give it a little extra grip, and it kind of makes it look nicer too in a way. So we'll go ahead and shrink that on as well. And that just takes a little bit of heat, and you want to make sure that you're rotating your wire around, and you're not putting too much heat in one spot, because you will melt this shrink tube and cause it to get a hole in it, actually. So you don't want to do that, but you want to melt it enough to where it's shrunk down over the wires that you are covering. And in this case, we're covering the plug itself, and the wires are just kind of secondary in this situation. But that's what we're looking at here, guys. So now we can go ahead, let this cool off, because that is kind of hot. And first thing we'll do is go ahead and turn the power off on here. I should have had that off when I was doing the shrink tube, but that's fine. And we can go ahead and pull the plug out, and there we have it. So, all right, guys, I wanted to show you the finished product here with the battery hold down in place. I'm using a battery strap on here, and I opted into using the cover on the outside because when you put the body on here, this part of the battery is exposed to the elements, and during a crash or something, I want as much protection on here as I can possibly get for this thicker battery. So I'm using a hold down, a battery strap, and everything is in place nice and tight. All my solder joints are ready to go. This thing's ready to go out and have some fun with. So stay tuned, guys. I'm going to be doing a video coming up in a day or two of this car in action. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see y'all in the next one. God bless the Republic.